Welcome to another episode of Marketing Tips for Doctors. I'm your host, Dr. Barbara Hales. Today we have with us Jodi Krangle. She has been a full-time voice actor since 2007 and has worked with clients all over the world, including Dell, Kraft, and Lindt. She specializes in brand voice, commercials, corporate narration, and podcast intros and outros. After noticing that voiceovers were often the last piece to be brought to a production, she started a podcast about the importance of sound and how it influences us. She does audio branding, the hidden gem of marketing, which is now a top 2% podcast in its fifth year with over 270 episodes. As a companion to her podcast, she created a house in Clubhouse called The Power of Sound and regularly hosts sound-related discussions there. She's also just finished her second consecutive year as a judge at the International Sound Awards. Who even knew? She's an avid tabletop gamer and crediting it for keeping her imagination sharp. Occasionally sings jazz tunes with a 9-piece band and loves all things sci-fi and fantasy. Welcome to the show, Jodi.
Thank you so much for having me, Barbara.
Can you share your background in voiceovers and sound design and how you became involved in the healthcare industry with it?
Well, I don't do sound design, just so you're aware. But voiceover, I was volunteering my time at the CNIB, which is the Canadian National Institute for the Blind here in Canada. And I was reading magazine articles onto reel to reel tape at the time. So, quite some time ago. And the bug kind of bit then. I didn't really know what voiceover was until about that point. And then I was doing internet marketing and SEO from 95 until 2007. And I had that in the back of my head. And when Google became the only game in town, that was the only search engine that mattered in around 2007. Um, I just decided it was time for me to do what I had wanted to do for a long time, and that was voiceover. And so I started that in 2007, basically full time from that point on because I was already self employed. So it was just really a focus shift and I had a lot to learn. But I have worked in the medical field, voiceover wise, for quite some time. So I do, I do um, commercials and corporate narration and some medical narration. And I've done the voiceovers for a lot of things for Memorial Hospital and Joe DiMaggio Children's Hospital in Hollywood, Florida, and all sorts of other places. The health insurance industry, of course. There's a lot out there. Sky Rizzy, I did some stuff for some drug commercials and I've worked in the healthcare industry as a voice talent for a number of years, and this is year 17, so it's been a while.
What unique challenges or opportunities have you encountered while working on healthcare related projects?
Well, the drug names can be very tricky, as you probably well know. That can be a lot of a learning curve right there. So medical narration is not my favorite thing to do. I will do it if asked. I have a particular client of mine who comes back for that particular thing. They're short, they're like 5 minutes or less. Instructional videos for people who are having health concerns or going through health challenges, and the ability to understand what it is they're going through and what drugs will help them and what the efficacy is for certain treatments and that kind of thing. So that can be a very interesting challenge in and of itself, just learning how to pronounce the names properly. But there's a very specific type of hopefulness that needs to come through in the voice when you're doing voiceover for healthcare. And I think some people miss the mark if they think it's all doom and gloom, because it's not. You're supposed to be giving the people listening hope. That's what it's about. It's not joyful per se, but it's certainly not doom and gloom. So there is a delicate balance in how you approach that voice wise.
What considerations go into creating a voiceover for healthcare settings, such as patient education videos or instructional manual?
Well, like I said, you have to be careful of the tone that you take. And it also depends on who you're talking to. Are you talking to a 65-year-old woman that you happen to know or that you're just meeting? Are you talking to a 7-year-old child? You know, are you trying to talk to someone that you know really well over a coffee? They're all different perceptions. They're all different ways of approaching the tone that you would use for who you're talking to. And being aware that it is a dialogue. You're not talking to a bunch of people, you're talking to one person. So that one person has your voice in their ear, and it's that one person you're talking to. You're not talking to a group. And
Well, are
there's a
you the one
very
that writes the script?
I'm not. No, no. Generally, I'm given a script. And the interesting thing about healthcare is that a lot of times it's gone through legal many times. So I cannot change a word. So it's being natural, sounding like a real human being, saying these words that perhaps a real human being would never say to a real human being. So it can be challenging in that way. There is a certain, that's why they call it voice acting. So there is a certain amount of acting that goes into that because you have to sound natural in a completely unnatural setting.
How do you tailor your tone and delivery for different audiences, such as patients versus healthcare professionals?
It depends on the formality a lot of times. So if you're talking to a patient, you're a little less formal. And then if you're talking to the healthcare professional, let's say a doctor, and trying to instruct them on the latest drug or the latest piece of equipment that they might be using, you can talk to them on their level, which means you've been given all of the tools to speak to them about this particular product or service or whatever it happens to be on their level of understanding, which means I have to sound like I know what I'm talking about, even if I have no clue. So that is a very different tone from talking to someone who's going through a particular diagnosis that they need some instruction on and they need some help figuring out what to do next. That is it's a hopeful tone, it's a warm tone, it's a I'm talking to you, not at you. They don't want someone talking to them from on high. And I hate to say it, but often the doctors are too high up to really get that. You know, it depends on the doctor, of course, but if the bedside manner isn't there, they kind of need someone like my help.
Do they ever ask you, like Jordians, to sing your message?
Oh, no. No, they do not. I'm kind of thankful for that. That's a different thing entirely. Although, I mean, it would depend. If someone asked me to sing a jingle for a drug, if they pay me, I'm willing.
Well, paying you and listening to you may be two different things.
That is very true. Yes, but these things do not come for free.
What role does sound play in enhancing accessibility for people with disabilities or language barriers in healthcare?
That's a tricky question. I think it depends on what other aspects you have. Like, say, if you're presenting a video, you would definitely want to have closed captions for people who are hearing impaired. For people who are sight impaired, then you would definitely have to make sure you have the right tone. The voice becomes much more important in that case. But I would say that if you're talking to another human being, the voice is kind of the mirror to the soul. So you have to take that role on very seriously.
Sure.
And yeah, I mean, it is a connection. You're making a human to human connection. So things like AI voices don't have that human to human connection. And whether or not we're consciously aware of it, subconsciously we are aware of it. So I think it's a mistake for anyone, for instance, to think that an AI synthesized voice can do medical instruction or, you know, helping clients figure out what their next step should be after a cancer diagnosis. I mean, like this is something you have to be very conscious of. You have to make that connection so that the person listening knows that you're actually listening, that you're actually trying to help them. If it's a synthetic voice, it just doesn't sound like you're really there to help them.
Sure. So, how do you ensure that your voiceovers convey empathy and trust, which are crucial in healthcare communication?
Well, again, that's coaching. That is a lot of the things that I've learned over 17 years, and I never stop coaching. I'm always learning more. Connecting with your voice is knowing your instrument. And that's where coming at this from a singer's perspective helps me out a lot because I know how to use my instrument. And my instrument is about making connections. So it's not just speaking, it's not just saying the words on a piece of paper, it's making sure that the meaning in them is coming through.
Are there certain connections with patients that, have kept with you, that you think of these people over and over again?
I don't tend to have one on one connections personally because what I'm typically doing is I'm reading a script that's been given to me for a specific purpose and to be listened to by a specific person or audience. And for me, it's mostly about making sure that what I'm saying means something to them on the other end. So if I'm, for instance, doing a medical narration about lung cancer, let's say, and they have a diagnosis and I mean, I imagine if I got a diagnosis like that, I'd be terrified. So imagine how the person listening to that is feeling, knowing what they're going to have to go through after they hear this narration. And the idea that I'm trying to calm them, I'm trying to give them hope for the future. There is a way through this. Just do what you need to do and you'll be okay, is kind of the idea that I'm trying to get across. That's powerful. And that means a lot to me as well as the person listening.
So, do
So,
you put yourself into that situation to give yourself more, inspiration?
oh, yeah, empathy is really important. I mean, it's part of the acting, right? If you are acting, you are putting yourself in the place of the person who would be receiving that. All the greatest actors are being someone that they have empathy for, even if it's a bad guy. Like the bad guys very rarely think they're the bad guys, if you really think about it that way. So yeah, it is acting, but it's also a lot of empathy, and you really definitely have to get in touch with your your empathetic side, your human feelings. So yeah, it
What
can be
emerging,
difficult.
I'm sorry.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
okay. No, go
What
ahead.
emerging trends in sound or voiceover technology are impacting healthcare, such as the AI generated voice or interactive systems? I know you mentioned already that
Hmm.
it's unlikely that AI is going to, take over your position because it's more synthetic and they can't have one that shows emotion or empathy. But are there emerging trends where they're using that anyway?
Oh, I'm sure there are, and it's getting better all the time. I would not say that it's not I would not say it's impossible. Put it that way. I would just say that using it for one-on-one connections with certain narrations, if you want to make a connection with someone in sound, don't use anything synthetic. I, I'm not saying that sampled music isn't going to make a connection, but it was created by a human being and then used in a setting where a human being would get benefit from it. So if you're just using a voice that you think sounds human enough and taking 5 minutes to type out whatever you're going to say and then putting it out there in sound, you're doing a disservice to the people who are experiencing that project, whatever it happens to be, because we connect with human beings. Sound is emotion. And that's how you're going to reach people. So if you're using advertising, if you want to connect in advertising, because otherwise advertising is a waste of time, Why would you even put something out there if you don't want to make a connection and get people to care about your product? There's no point. Why would you bother? Uh, in branding, if you have a particular medical piece of equipment or you're a medical company and you make certain products or services and you want to be known as someone who cares about the people you're making this for, then sound is the way to do it. That is how you make that full on heart connection. And we as human beings respond to that. So yeah, visual is important. I'm not saying it's not important, but sound is where you reach people's emotions. That's how you reach the heart. So cheaping out on that is a number one mistake. And it breaks my heart to see anyone doing that.
Can you walk us through your creative process when developing a voiceover for a healthcare project?
A lot of it has to do with direction I get from the client, of course. A lot of it has to do with the music they've chosen for whatever it is they're making. So if it's a commercial or it's a corporate narration, usually they've chosen a piece of music that they want to put over the visuals. If it's a video, then I'm not voice over, I'm voice under. Right? So if I'm thinking of this, I'm there to present what's on the screen. And often the script will almost look like a haiku. It's less about a full wall to wall bunch of script and more about illustrating how important what they're seeing on the screen is and helping to explain it and helping to get the emotions through along with the music. So it really depends on what the project is for and what the purpose of the project is. And then it's a matter of collaboration with the client, knowing how formal or informal they are. Do they use a lot of contractions? Do they not? What's the feeling of the company? Are they caregivers or do they want to inspire? There's, you can do both, but it's a different feeling than just being a caregiver or just being, let's say, someone who is giving you information. So like a sage type, right? There's a different feeling to that. It's a lot about archetypes. So, and if you talk to audio branding companies, that's a lot of what they do. They'll do a mood board with someone to figure out what their audio brand should be. And
Mhm.
they'll go through the archetypes and decide with the client, well, which ones do you think you fit into? Are there more than one? You know? So there's a lot that can go into that. And then again, after 17 years, a lot of it is instinct with me. So I can look at a script and I can just, tell from the music. As a musician, the minute I hear music that's going to go on the background of one of these, I'm I'm there in a snap. I know exactly what's needed because I know what the emotion is. When I know what the emotion is that they want to convey, my interpretation of that emotion is likely to be different from someone else's interpretation, but they're hiring me for a reason. So they want my interpretation.
How do you measure the success or impact of your voiceovers in healthcare projects?
My clients keep coming back to me. I
That's a good
mean,
clue.
yeah, it's a good clue. Good clue. I've been working with the Memorial people and Joe DiMaggio for, I want to say, almost 10 years now. It's probably, yeah, it's been a while. And I love everything that I do with them, and it's an absolute fantastic medical system there. They've really got something good going. So that and I keep getting hired for medical stuff and healthcare, and I love it all. So
Well, that brings me to my next question,
mhm.
which is if resources were not a limitation, what type of healthcare project involving sound would you most likely want to work on?
I really feel that hospitals need to have better sound in them. I don't know if that's something that I could help with. Certainly, if there are announcements to be made in a hospital, I'm happy to lend my voice for that kind of a thing. The branding of a hospital, I love doing these things. They're really inspirational and very helpful to the patients that are and the people who work in a hospital. So on my podcast, I had someone named Dr. Professor Michael Schutz, and he talked about how the beeps in hospitals are killing us. And they kind of are. If you are in a hospital for any length of time, his mother-in-law is a nurse, and she calls it a beeping hellscape. So, as a doctor yourself, I'm sure you've experienced this. Hospitals are not for people to recover in anymore. There are so many machines going that are alarming, but not needing to be alarming. So they're monitoring us, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But they sound alarming, and they stress people out, and they keep people from sleeping. And there's a lot going on in hospitals, especially now, because back in the 50s there weren't that many machines. Now there are so many machines, and they all make poor sound. They all make bad, stressing, annoying sound. So improve that sound, and you've really got yourself a place where people can actually heal instead of claiming that they can heal.
So what type of sound would you replace it with?
The major problem, and this is something Michael talked about when we spoke, the major problem about these beeps is that they are computerized and they cut off really abruptly. So if you just let them decay a little, if you made them a little less annoying and more musical, you would actually make people feel a lot better in that environment. So yeah, it really is just about making it less computerized. The sound less computerized and more musical.
What song would it be?
Oh, I don't know if there's a particular song. I think it would depend, but I think it's a prime example of where medical technology could have an audio brand. Like that medical technology could have a song of its own. It could
That's a
have it
really
drilled
good
in it.
idea. I think
Yeah,
that we should put it out there and let them know it's a whole new source of branding.
yeah, totally. And I think it's really important, and especially if it was calming, if it was indicative of what the instrument does and what the company is. Kind of like GE washing machines have like a certain little thing that they do at the end of a wash cycle. You know what
I
I
know
mean?
I have one. It's great.
Okay. Yeah. So that's pleasant, right? That's something you wouldn't mind hearing. I'm not saying alarms shouldn't be alarming, but not everything in a hospital is an alarm. And if you had the monitoring stuff sounding much better, then when the alarms happened, you'd actually know what was happening.
Well, what's the most rewarding aspect of contributing your voice to healthcare projects?
I think it's just that connection, that human to human connection. If it works on behalf of a company, mostly what I do is advertising, marketing, and branding. And I love that. The psychology behind it fascinates me. It's why I have my own podcast about it. But I think it's that human to human connection that is most rewarding for anyone who's working, especially in healthcare, because it's so important for people to get that information and to understand what it is they're opting in for, or to get them the drug information they need, or to make sure that they know the hospital near them is able to take them 24/7 in their ER, like this kind of stuff, right? So it's important information that people need to have, and if my voice can help them understand how important that is and how much that company cares about what they think about that, then I've done my job. That's what I want to do day in, day out.
Is there any memorable project that you've done that you'd like to share with us?
Uh, there was a project that I did for Joe DiMaggio Children's Hospital that had to do with uh, the doctors. It was really interesting because they'd done it visually, like the doctor and the patient were in two completely separate places, and then they had, this is Billy, and he has this problem that this doctor needs to fix. And they were in two separate places. And then the doctor walked into the place where the child was with his parents. And, they talk about how the problem was fixed, through this doctor's innovative treatment. at Joe DiMaggio Children's Hospital. And it was just really visually stunning. And then to have my voice over that, letting people feel the warmth and emotion of that feeling when the child was healed. It was emotionally impactful for me and hopefully for anyone who was watching it. And they've done a number of really wonderful campaigns over there that I've been really privileged to be a part of.
That really sounds wonderful.
Hmm.
So, what I'd like to ask you at this point is, since you're so experienced and you've done it for so long, how would you advise physicians who are talking to their patients
Hmm.
on a day-to-day basis, who may be imparting, bad news about their health? Like,
Hmm.
how should they sound, or what should they strive for in talking to their patients?
It's going to sound different for everyone. And I know every doctor is completely different and deals with completely different diagnoses and all sorts of different things in a day. So, I mean, I'm not saying that, doctors necessarily are not doing this correctly, just that empathy is key. If people don't believe that you care, whether you do or not, I mean, honestly, let's put it out there, right? Like, a doctor has a lot to deal with in a day, and I understand they talk to a lot of people. But if you can just care and have your voice convey that caring, that empathy, you're going to go a long way. Our voice, like I said, it's the window to our soul as much as our eyes are. And if you can convey that you care about the diagnoses that you're giving to this patient and that you want to help them through it, that's going to go a long way.
Well, I appreciate you coming on the show today. It was really fascinating to hear. A lot of people really never think about your career, and yet
Oh, I lost you.
it really is something that we deal with
Uh oh.
here almost every day.
Uh oh. Is that me or
So I really appreciate that. Thank you. Are
I hope that's not me.
you still with me?
Nope, it's not me. Oh, are you back?
Right, you're still with me?
Yes, I am. Yeah, I lost you there for a second.
Okay, well, I was just saying, this is not something that, the average person might think about when thinking
Uh
about
oh. I lost you
voiceovers.
again. What is going on here? It's not me.
This has been another episode of Marketing Tips for Doctors with your host, Dr. Barbara Hales. And we've had a very illuminating session today of voiceovers in healthcare. Thank you for being with us today. Till next time.